Hey, thanks for tuning in to Good Authority. In this week's episode, I had a chance to sit down with Christian Idiodi, who's a partner at the Silicon Valley Product Group and is just an amazing thinker on how we think about technology, how we build technology products. And he's really passionate about coaching and the human skills and empathy and curiosity. We got into a really rich conversation around how we all need to upskill ourselves relative to the current environment, especially with the emergence of AI. So whether you're in the product field or not, I think you'll get a ton out of this conversation around how we show up in our world, how we think about emerging technology, how we think about the role of government, opening up opportunities for others, especially for our kids, and to take risks in this crazy, chaotic modern world. I think you'll really enjoy the conversation as I did. Thanks for tuning in. Christian, thank you so much for coming on Good Authority. Really excited to talk with you. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Jonathan. Looking forward to this time.
I'm going to start with something that I know we both share. Obviously, Christian, as a partner in Silicon Valley Product Group, you have a front row seat to so much of what's happening in the modern workplace. I know that we share an optimism that a lot of people don't share, right? A lot of people, they think about work and they think, well, work sucks and it's not getting any better. Just move on. It is what it is. And I know that you don't feel that way. And I know I don't feel that way. So I just want to start on a note of optimism and just hear from you based on what you've seen and what you're seeing and what you're passionate about. Where are we going with the future of work relative to human skills and curing some of the ills of the workplace? Even though it looks grim out there a lot of times, there's a lot of light to talk about too. And I'd love to start by talking about that.
Oh, what a great topic. I've always kind of made this point that in many cases, companies cannot care for people. People care for people. And we kind of lose sight of the facts that companies are made of people that do need some care as much as they will need guidance through context and coaching. I've seen work evolve over time, and it's unfortunate even in our education system that we reinforce in some ways all of the values we learned in an industrial age, when we had factory workers and manufacturing and most of the books, if you think of our teachers, worked, in an industry or a time period where knowledge workers were very few and we needed hands. And so most of the modeling of what good leadership, good management looks like, how to run effective companies were modeled around operational excellence and manufacturing plans. So what's happening, we don't have a lot of leaders that have experienced working in an empowered environment where leaders have given them problems and relied on the collaborative problem-solving skills of talented people to work together and solve problems. A lot of the artifacts in how we work, how we solve problems, how we go about business today, the tools, the techniques we use, the frameworks are really driven by a generation that work was different. And, in today's work with technology, with AI, today's work with remote teams, with the connectivity, with the it's very different. And so, the best companies all share a common set of principles in how they work. I mean, they work with empowered teams. They get smart, talented people, and they give them problems to solve and tell them what to do. And they give them context and space to go around and discover the best way to solve those problems. They don't measure them on tactical items and how many widgets did you manufacture. They measure them on solving the problems, growing the business, on outcomes, on results. We're starting to see a trend where the most successful companies in the world are talking about their keys to success. And it has nothing to do with what you might think in that sense. It has nothing to do with, oh my goodness, they have great technology and that was the secret to their stuff, a great manufacturing plant. Nobody talks about, how cool it is that Apple can roll out 3 widgets or 3 iPhones in a second or something like that. Instead they talk about the culture, the environment, the creativity, the problem solving, how people work together. When you hear those leaders talk about what even good leadership looks like in their companies, they are all calling out context, good strategy. They are calling out coaching, people that care for people. So I'm extremely optimistic that as the case studies of the future, the ones that write about people that have been successful today will no longer reinforce some of the habits of the past with command and control models and frameworks that we pick. So I'm optimistic that we will hopefully start to have a generation that understands what good work comes from. And yeah, maybe I think Andy Grove says there are only two reasons people don't experience do good work: either that they don't know how to do good work, or that they're not motivated to do good work, and that's a leadership thing.
It's funny, I remember one of the books I read long ago. I think I'm getting the title right. It was called The Theory of Constraints.
Huh.
And it's like a classic old management book, like the kind you're talking, and it's great, but it's about the manufacturing process and how to like rethink manufacturing and the systems. And as you were talking, it made me think about the it's like all of the old school stuff, which has validity and has its place. It's all either has become or is becoming a commodity,
Yes.
right? Everybody has access to all of that stuff. And now with AI, it's a chat away, right? So, hey, what's the best way to do X? There are no secrets anymore. And so I feel like, and this is the work that I think is really interesting and you're alluding to, is the work of the human is going upstream by necessity, because being able to be in sort of solution mode, task mode, tactic mode, well, we're rapidly being raced out of those tasks
Yeah.
by technology. So I think it's a clarion call for humans to up level the human part of it, right? And I think that's why I know there's a lot of fear out there, especially with AI, but there's always fear, right? Every new technological advancement, oh, it's going to replace the humans. And I think what we're seeing right now is it's not that we have to get faster or smarter, we have to become more human
Yes.
in response to
That's
this
right.
technological shift. Yeah.
It's a big key. My kids were asking me about AI and what jobs will be left for them with AI and what should they get good at in the age of AI. And I said at the end of the day, if they're in an environment with humans, there are two things you've got to get good at: is one, being able to work with AI or tell AI what to do, and the other is being able to interpret what AI does as good for humans or not, or good enough. And I said, as long as it exists to serve humans, it will always be a human decision. To your point, so we've got to upskill strategic thinking. Does this work well for what our needs are? Can it attend to? Does it solve the problem in the way we want it to solve? Is it
Hmm.
ethical? Can we do it? Should we do it? Does it create value for us? All of those questions are truly human questions.
I don't always ask this question, but I almost always ask this question, which is, it's been my experience that most people in your shoes who have a body of work and who do the type of work that you do have formative experiences where people who were in positions of authority either had a really positive influence on you and made you change your mind, or really negative influence on you and made you change your mind. And it really was a wake up call to like, oh, I know when I'm in a position of leadership, I'm not going to do it that way. And so I wanted to ask you, you don't have to name names, but is there a formative experience or two that you could share with us?
Well, I grew up in Africa. I went to a boarding school in Africa. I went to a gifted and talented program, which was probably placed in the middle of the jungle. 12 years old, you're out with other kids, self-serving, without power or water or infrastructure in that way. And so you learn a tremendous amount of survival skills. But we had people that spoke multiple languages, different religions, just from different paths and backgrounds. And I think I learned a couple of things early on. I learned a tremendous amount of the power of communication. I learned languages quickly. I learned how to connect people quickly. And I saw that I could navigate better because I could connect to groups of people, kind of all your open mindedness in how you work with people to solve problems. I learned a lot of leadership there as a in a very young age, kind of from my 12 to 16. But I had tremendous formative experience because I was fortunate enough right around 22, 23 to kind of win an innovation competition, kind of to start my own business, kind of under the wing of a company. I'd invested $1 million to go start my own company. And, I spent a lot of time writing an elaborate business plan for how I will spend the money, what I would do in that. And I remember my very first board meeting. Company was owned by some of the very big major newspapers. So they had all these legacy executives and they just were laughing like, you haven't done anything? They're like, look, you're 22. We were hoping to come here and laugh about all the stupid decisions you would do, and so that we can coach and advise you on all the things you should in that way. Like, yeah, like we could have made more money if we put that million in the bank, earning interest, than you trying to get everything perfect by not going. And I remember that day because I sat in the parking lot, wondering to myself, like, business is hard, building a company is hard. I need to I was going to be a doctor. I was like, maybe I should go back to medical school and not do this whole business thing. I had that gut wrenching check where you're like, what is this for me? Like, I have to actually take an idea. It sounded good on paper, but actually do it. There was not the excuse. People have the excuse. If only I had the money. If only I had the support. If only I had this, I will build this. I wish I had this. And here I am. I have all those things, answered. There are people saying, go, there's infrastructure, there's support. I became a quick student of like, people do it. How have they done it? And I'm trying to study. Regardless of what I studied, everybody started doing something. The one thing and I realized I was trying to study for what was perfect way to start than just starting. I was able to grow that business to like $10 million over the next 18 months through it. And what I think I learned through that period of time was there's no mastery or there's no skill. There's nothing that replaces actually doing. There's no theory, no book, no textbook. It was very formative in my mindset about experimentation, testing, what failure really meant. Is it failure learning? And don't get me wrong, I had two successful businesses after that, and the company thought, this guy is awesome at this. We're going to give you a limited budget to build as many products as you have. And I failed woefully in the next 17. I cost the company, I think when we looked at the budget, like almost $26 million. I've not had a single product failure since then because I learned a lot of those in that failure. So probably the most formative aspect of my product work today was this protective culture that allowed me to learn in what people might call fail. And maybe I had earned some of the right with like maybe the first idea looked good. You're like, okay, you can do something. But I'm thinking like nobody's wanting ideas. And I started to reflect what made my first two ideas good and this 17 in a row bad. And I realized in the beginning, I knew nothing. I had no assumptions. I had no ego. I had no, and I started to say, okay, can I fake that again? Can I recreate my lack of knowledge and go talk to customers, learn from people, connect with people, be more collaborative than making decisions from a conference room? And when I went back to those things, I started to get success again. And I'm like, oh, it's not like it wasn't luck. It wasn't a fluke. There's actually something to the humility of solving a problem, to true collaboration, to learning from customers, to focusing on a problem, to experimentation. And you could actually make that how you do things. And, and I've been so fortunate to have a successful career from that learning.
So many times when I'm listening to people talk, I often think to myself, once again, the Buddha was right. Like I have this thought like probably 5 times a day in every domain of expert with farmers, whatever it is, right? And what you made me think about was this beginner's mind, right? Which is to be able to see a problem with fresh eyes, right? With that lack of ego, to just see it for what it is without the assumption, without the bias, without the preconceived conclusion of what it must be or what you need the other person to do. And it's for sure, right? It's in product, it's innovation, it's in relationships, marriage, parenting, like in all of these areas of life. But there's something else in there that I thought was super interesting that you said, where oftentimes the context is so rich that we can have a theory about how we would operate in that context, but there's really no way. I was working with a group of managers with one of our clients the other day, and I asked them a bunch of questions about how the senior leaders were behaving. And I asked them, like, just was an informal conversation. How would you grade the leaders on this skill, that skill, the other skill? And, pretty bad scores, right? From that they gave. And I said, okay, how do you guys think you would do if you were in that role? And they all were like, I was like, I think you would suck at it about as much as they do. And it's not a judgment of the person. It's like you enter into that space and all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of context that you can't plan for.
Yes.
Right. So I love that you draw our attention to how do we bring ourselves back in any domain of life, right? How do we bring ourselves back to that beginner's mind, to that lack of ego, to be really listening?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
For what is actually happening.
I love that. And more so for leadership. I think there are two dynamics here that I see affect the point you're making. One is most people are promoted into that leadership role and they're not coached for it before they are in that role. And the second you become a leader, you're meant to be doing leader things, not learning how to be a leader. So nobody kind of gives you permission anymore to say things like, I don't know, I'm not sure, I made a mistake. Those are things that people do, not leaders do. And so you kind of have to hide all of those insecurities and deal with the imposter syndrome or this nagging belief that you're not certain about it. And you make a lot of things up. And that cycle feeds itself. But, the second cycle is, most leaders are doing how they saw leadership done. So, even those people get promoted, they're like, well, I mean, I guess this is the example I've seen. If you haven't seen good leadership, it's hard to do good leadership. If you haven't even practiced good leadership, it's hard to succeed at good leadership. And so begs the argument of we've got to get better at coaching people into the places they in every aspect of our life.
One of the things that I wanted to talk with you about in listening to some of your other interviews, and you have so much expertise in product management. I talk with a lot of entrepreneurs these days who have a similar predicament as I do, in particular relative to AI, and I want to get your thoughts on it. So I'm a non-technical founder, right? So my background is in leadership. I'm an author. I talk with CEOs. I do organizational design, things like that. So I don't know the first thing about writing code, but these days, right, I can build a business, and I have created a new business. That because of AI, because of the power of what this technology at least represents in potential, I can build a whole business around technology far more easily than I could have in the past, right? Where that lack of credential would really hurt me, in other domains. It still could hurt me now. But how do I think about that? I know there's a lot of non-technical founders and entrepreneurs. And these days, there's a lot of people who are fascinated by AI, building businesses in the AI world, who don't, they're not experts on AI or language models, but they want to get involved in this space. How is it different or not different to think about product management, innovation in AI versus in what we would say traditional software development?
To be clear, like I look at AI from the lens of emerging technology, and there's some argument that more emerging technology will keep coming out. It is probably the most significant emerging technology since the internet. But I mean, the internet brought fear, confusion, and the same kind of conversations you were having with non-technical founders being like, oh my goodness, I have more reach. I don't need marketing. I've got the internet. I don't need product people. I've got this. All I need is this to make it happen. The reality, when I challenge companies on transforming, I often say, you could do it for fear, or you could do it from frustration or tech expenses, but your customers are also changing. Meaning, there's a whole generation, if you've got kids and or nephews or nieces, that if you ask them to do anything, the first thing they'll go through is probably pull their phone. Get me a car, they'll probably pull their phone, or hotel. Every activity or task, they'll probably turn to technology to help them solve. And if they don't know the answer, they probably are asking Google or Alexa or Siri. AI presents an opportunity for people to get right down to the heart of pointed answers, reducing the need for all the things that happen in between. But those things are happening. AI has just got the ability to learn what should happen and get more conclusion. So it is a tremendous emerging technology that should be leveraged. I do tell non-technical founders, and I say, look, we are beyond the era of solving a problem as a superhero. In that field, we are beyond the era of inventors of vaccinations or discoverers of very cool things that can be credited to one person. Most modern day innovation or inventions are team driven things, because there are so many angles in our modern world that we have to think about. The question of the best technology to do it is what we're maybe saying with AI, but there are ethical questions like, should we do it? There are questions like, can we do it? Is it going to work for us? Do we make money when we do it? What's the best experience people can have doing it? Because if, let's assume everybody could leverage AI, it will spit out the same thing. What differentiates you from the next person will fall down to how you want people to experience your solution. So there's some thoughtful, strategic aspects in the work that you do that are beyond the technology. So I always tell founders, look, in the world of AI, if you're good at telling AI what to do, you could probably get something really unique out of it. But if you're excellent at interpreting what AI does as good, better, ideal, great, or excellent in some ways that affects humans better, then you can start to differentiate your work. You will get tremendous leverage using it. There's no reason not to. It's become readily available and cheaper in its ability, in your ability to use it. However, you're still solving a problem. There's a reason you were setting out to do something. AI has just become an enabler or an accelerant of doing it. You need to bring that context to your team. Remember the focus of who you're trying to serve. It's a customer. You're not building for a computer or stuff like that. You're building for a human. You're saying, I want to leverage technology to solve that problem. I want to leverage the most innovative technology to solve that problem. And in today's world, it's AI. So collaborate with designers that have great experience, that can think about how humans will experience it. Collaborate with great technologists that can push the envelope on the right things to tell AI to do and how people will interpret it. But bring your context as a leader. That's the most powerful thing you can bring to your team as a non-technical leader. A vision of the world, a compelling motivation for people to care about how to make people's lives better with your solution. I think many non-technical leaders are overly critical of building technology products because they feel like, oh, I don't really know. I'm not the tech guy. You are. Because your customers don't attribute a good product or a bad product solely to the technology. They don't.
Yeah.
They care about the experience of it. They care about there's so much more that they attribute. Nobody is like, oh, it must have been Joe down in the office in California that made this mistake. It's like, oh, the website sucks. It sucks, the whole thing. So it's one of those things that I always tell non-technical founders, you are valuable because you represent the customer the best. You're solving a problem. You bring context and vision and strategy, and that makes a difference in the world.
There's a great tweet. I guess I don't know if we call them tweets anymore, but somebody had said basically the quote was the hottest programming language right now is English. Right? Which I thought was great, right? Because I know like the work that we're doing on the back end with the prompt and trying to get it to exactly as you described, right? The AI itself, the LLM is a commodity.
That's right.
But the nuance and the expertise to be able to get it to create an interaction with a human is a whole other matter. And obviously not English to the exclusion of other languages, but the person meant like the actual natural language to get it to behave in a certain way, I think is an undervalued, but maybe not so for so long.
That's right.
Skill. One of the things that I want to get your comment on was, I think some of the things that we say these days, a year from now, will sound dated, right? Because we don't know what we don't know, and there's going to be a bunch of emerging use cases for AI that we can't see yet. One of the principles that I'm holding for the way we think about it is, I want AI to increase both the frequency and the quality of actual human relationships.
Yes.
I don't want AI. I'm not interested in AI that replaces or degrades the quality of human interactions. Now, that may be especially relevant in my field, right, of leadership and coaching and management, but there's a lot of people who probably don't see the world that way, right, who would rather automate and digitize every transaction and every relationship. Talk to me about that. Like, is that even a reasonable fear that that's going to happen? How do we think about the ethics of which founders we trust? Obviously, there's a couple of people with a lot of power right now. How do you think about that as a consumer and a sponsor, educator of these types of technologies?
I mean, I don't think about it first as a dad. I struggle sometimes with talking with my kids about different interactions and human interactions, and how will it affect them in their communication skills, in their presentation skills, in their ability to communicate or date or have relationships. In some ways, if you only talk to somebody in a box and it's a swipe right or swipe left type of interaction and short words or 3-letter words for everything, and very short phrases and sentences and instances, and there's some redefinition of human interaction and empathy, and technology is trying to solve certain problems that are really fair problems, like loneliness and communication and collaboration and working together, and but at the end of the day, it is speaking a symptom of some deep-rooted issue and trying to solve it. Like, I don't care how much you build a great tool. If I don't trust you, Like, it's still going to come across in my chat. It's still going to come in my email. It might still, it's not going to fix the trust. Both of us getting a drink together and being vulnerable and stuff might accelerate fixing the trust than any of those tools in that way. And it's like, okay, well, we don't know what AI can do to help us get a drink together in some ways, So we're going to focus on what we can control, which is, when they do decide to talk, can I enable technology to do that? There are a couple of things there is many people struggle. I mean, many of these technology leaders, when you think about who has the power strategically with business goals, right? And because we got to grow this year, and the fastest way to grow is to fix this problem or this low-hanging fruit or easy accessible things. But many of them started by solving a meaningful problem in that way. And the reality in these disciplines is I'm always coaching teams on the balance in product management. You have to solve a problem in a way humans will love, call them customers, and in a way that also works for your business, whether that's making you money or revenue or loyalty or whatever your key metric is. And the reason you need a discipline like product people is they're trying to do both of them. They're trying to get you an answer that gives both of those things at the same time. Many cases, companies calibrate one way or the other, right? You could be like, yeah, we need to grow fast. And we might do that at the expense of good human outcomes. Or, you're okay is better than you're happy. That's okay. Are they okay? Anybody die? No, that's great outcome in some ways. Or, democratizing data and the freedom of people in some ways. If you can imagine, there are many ethical questions that come into play with some of these, particularly the AI world. I think if we put the power back in the hands of the consumer, we might start to get different outcomes in the world, because we adopt trends very quickly. We pick up the latest, coolest thing, and we've moved with it, not Twitter anymore, from X to this to a generation. It's like, our parents are on Facebook. You're like, money was made for us. And then your kids are on TikTok, but maybe Snapchat was made for them. And there are all these generational things coming up, with emerging things coming up. And the power would shift over time by the power of the consumer, more than over the technology or the founder in that way. And we've seen many a great company, but these great innovative companies are good at reinventing themselves some ways, and that will happen.
I think about a lot these days, government. I know it's sort of out of fashion, but I believe in good government as a former lawyer and a fan of the Constitution, the actual one, not the one people try to describe on the internet. What worries me is if I think about if you think about a congressional hearing 30 or 40 years ago here in the US, there was a gap even then, but it was relatively small. The gap of knowledge from the people in Congress relative to the generic tech executive, there was a gap. I feel like that gap, we're going to look back, 5 years ago when Mark Zuckerberg would testify, or any of these other, sort of the current to last generation of leaders, let's say, the gap was way wider,
Right.
where you knew that the people on the stage, the Congress people, had no idea what he was talking about, at all. And probably their staff didn't really either. Now we go AI, and it's like the technology, the technologists, and the super smart people who have that profit motive. The train has left the station, and they're getting smarter and smarter and more, and the tools are getting faster and faster, and our government is getting dumber and dumber and less informed,
Yes.
and less curious and less critical. And it's that's what I worry about. Well, I'm fine. I'm an entrepreneur. I believe in making money. I think it's a good thing. But the divergence between people who are doing that and the regulators, and of course this is in every industry,
Yes.
that's what I worry about these days.
Wow, very, very valid worry. And we've got to get tech into government, at least the knowledge of it, the understanding of it, because it's just the impetus of the future of its citizens. They are dependent on it in their day-to-day life. And we don't want to have, 300 deaths by auto self-driving cars before we think it's important. We don't want to have, it's kind of one of those things to regulate those patterns better, or, bad issues from, and there is a responsibility. And I think part of it is also generational, like we talked about in the beginning of this talk, with the kinds of leaders that we have in government. They do have to start to reflect the citizens, the diversity, the tech-centric, so that we kind of bridge that gap. We need more people like yourself to be in government, right? That's the idea. Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to Lena Khan, who's my favorite current human in government, who's the chairwoman of the FTC. We'll put a link to an interview with her. She was on the Daily Show, among other places, but is exactly the type of person that I think both you and I want.
That's right.
In now, she has 100 lawyers at the FTC. She probably needs 10,000 lawyers for her to do her job.
Yes.
It's definitely a David and Goliath type of situation, and I think she's the type of character who's inspiring. When I was back in law school, so this was like the early 90s when I applied to law school, people were going to law school because of a terrible old TV show called LA Law, right? That was our motivation. We thought that was cool, right? Nowadays, people are going to law school because of Lena Khan. That's way better, right? Like that's a much better reason to go to law school is because of Lena Khan, because you want to go work for the FTC and you want to right size tech and put it in its place. Like I'm all for that. So more leaders like Lena. So I want to shift gears in our last segment here to what I know is really the heart of your work, which is the work that you're doing in Africa and your passion for taking your own experiences and sharing those and bringing incredible insight and tools and opportunity to folks in Africa. Tell us a little bit about the work you're doing these days over there.
Yeah, no, it's I'm originally from Africa, and I've spent most of my career in the States, and most of my work is still in the States. But if you can imagine an ecosystem, I mean, if you pick a country, say like Nigeria, with close to 40% unemployment, and we sweat at 4%. In some ways, you got almost 2 million people graduating from school with no jobs, poor infrastructure with limited power. But high tech agency, you've got cities with 94% cell phone penetration. They want coverage, they want to communicate, they want to use technology. And what you start to realize is this significant gap between how technology is used to solve problems across the continent, but also the unique challenges of trying to solve a problem in those environments. Nobody in Silicon Valley goes to work and says, "Will we have power today to write code?" Or, will we even have the roads to make it to work? Or, those are basic things. There's a massive failure in what I call the biggest public platform service, in which we call our government. In many other parts of the developing world, the infrastructure does not exist for which that can accelerate the use of technology. And so I have a nonprofit in Africa. We focus on trying to accelerate that. We focus on accelerating the ability for governments to build infrastructure, for technology to support the country, internet, education, accessibility within Africa. We want to accelerate education of technology because we believe it's empowering to entrepreneurs. I mean, even if you wanted to use AI in Africa to solve a problem, you're probably going to be working to serve other markets. And what we see is many people making money on a problem than from solving the problem. People going around, we got bad roads. Well, let's not fix the road. Let's build bigger cars. We don't have power. Well, let's get portable electricity or generators. And you will see good intentioned people. Oh, there's not healthcare in a village. And so we're going to make an iPad and put a doctor in a village that a whole village can come and get medical advice. And you're like, yay. They're like, well, but we can't make money from that. So we're going to pivot markets and go to Germany or some other market that will pay us. So these are very, very big common threads in just some of the challenges in what it means to solve a problem on the continent. And so, my nonprofit focuses on certain things. We focus on education and computer literacy. We have programs, so we take a solar-powered bus to a village and we expose kids to computers for the very first time. It's such a magical experience to see a kid that is a future Bill Gates that probably would never have seen a computer or be exposed to that, just naturally fall in love with technology. We're trying to bring a free computer science education to all of Africa and accelerate that. I'm launching a fund in Africa, kind of an investment fund, early catalytic fund, to help entrepreneurs get to product market fit, but to pair them up with real mentors and coaches and models of good product work. We don't have a Silicon Valley ecosystem where you could be like, oh, I can get advice, but you get money, you don't get advice over there. It sounds like a great idea. I hope it does what Facebook did. And you're like, no, it doesn't. Like, the environment is hard. There's not patience in the capital that they get in there, and I'm starting a product leadership accelerator because I believe if I can create great product companies with great product leaders, they will hire, train, and coach great product people that will in turn go start up great product companies and feed the system. Those are a lot of the components I am working on right now. I do working on employment in healthcare. There are certain sectors that I think are core in restabilizing or using technology. So it's a big passion of mine. I do a conference every year in Africa, the Inspire Africa Conference. And it's a way I get many tech leaders and executives from Europe and North America. They come and they volunteer coaching and teaching. I get people from several countries in Africa to come together and learn. And that's been also very rewarding.
That's beautiful. Thank you for doing that work. I know I was sharing with you off air just a bit of my own experience, limited as it is in Africa, and I was surprised to hear from some of the young people that I talk with how much of a hunger there is for coaching and teaching about leadership. There's such a diversity right across within Africa. It's one continent, but it's a massive continent with 1,000 different cultures. There's a bridge to common humanity that I think scares people away sometimes. We'll put links to that work and other things in the show notes as well. Anything that you want to share with our audience that we haven't had a chance to talk about, or a question that I haven't asked you that you've been dying for an interview to ask you for in the last 10 years and no one's ever had the guts to ask you?
Oh my goodness, in the last 10 years, my eldest son is 23 and he's never had a desire to work in tech or the discipline. Nobody's like, when you're growing up, my dad does that. That might seem boring or not cool, in that way. And he loves sports. He loves to do things in sports. And, he was like, I need to build an app, to advise people on kind of sports stats and all this. Like, he's very good at that kind of stuff. And, he started to research how to do the stuff. And he's like, whoa, is that what you do? Like that product stuff? And like that this is what those people do? He's like, I want to do that. It's like, and he's like, where can I learn? Can I find a book? Because I'm like feeling like, okay, like I teach people, like kind of write books around the same thing and the topic. Maybe you should start at home in some ways to do it, but he's now saying, like, how do I get into this discipline? How do I actually start a career? Like, I'm doing sports management or have a different passion, but now I want to make a pivot into tech. And I think many people underestimate, the same kind of advice I got. Because, I was pre-med in college. I was going to be a medical doctor, and I was waiting for medical school when I won this competition to be a non-technical founder of a technology company. And I struggled with all of the reasons not to start. Do I have the right plan? Do I have the right things in some ways? I've always told people this: you don't get mastery at anything by avoiding it. And I've always wished there was a way society encouraged more people with the courage to start or to learn. And I tell people, we do product work, we do leadership work, we do tech work in every aspect of our life that is not even that. We do it in our families, in our homes, when we volunteer, when we spend time in that. And the world is in need of more actors than spectators. The world is in need of more people with the courage to try. And I think it's good enough to try. I think many people look at all the stats of the number of failed businesses, the number of stuff, and I'm like, it's not enough. I want 1 million failed businesses every year. I want 10 million failed businesses, because if you look at the stat and only 10% of them succeed, we will have a better batting average and our problem solved, because more people have the guts to try. I'm like, son, start doing your app. It's like, what do? I say, draw it on a piece of paper. Let's start there. Pitch me a vision of the world you want to create. Like, just start building it today. And I've always wished more parts of society encouraged people. Most people encourage, it's going to fail. You got to have it right. And, it's a scary world today. And I'm like, it's still going to be scary. You're probably going to fail. But my goodness, what you learn from trying. What you learn from starting. The dent you might make, even if you hire 2 people for a few months, in some ways, and then the idea failed. You hired 2 people, you started something, you built a muscle. I have not met any great entrepreneur that has not some great stories of failures, of mistakes, or learnings that they can share. I've not met any. I just wish society had more of those. So if I had that secret magic weapon to encourage people, is just a little bit of courage. Hearts of the young people, in the power that they have in changing the world, to go beyond using their voice, to take it action, we're trying to solve wicked hard problems, in new, meaningful ways. And the courage to think differently, would be a nice wish of mine.
Yeah, you made me think of something I heard recently, and I think it's connected to this kind of an epidemic of rumination among kids these days. And I think it's always been the case where entrepreneurs are the people who had this, okay, I'll put it in quotes, gift of not ruminating and not like they're just, I'm just going to go do it. And I think part of the problem, especially with kids who grow up on social media, is it looks like everybody out there has it figured out and has a perfect idea and has a great business, and the barrier to entry, I think, is artificially high in a lot of people's minds.
Yes.
Even though, as you said, there's a risk. So I think moving from rumination to activation is probably a great shift that we can encourage kids to do. And I heard somebody recently say something. They said, with all of our kids, we need to say, "Hey, honey, I love you. You're going to be fine. Now get out of my house and go have an adventure."
Oh,
And
I
I
love
thought,
that.
is that
I
great?
love that. And it's always a big funny thing as a parent, because he's kind of like, that's the one thing we try to prepare our kids for, to get out of the house. And we panic when they get out of the house. But it's like, that's what you've been preparing them your whole life for, to survive in the world. And we should encourage a lot of that. Adventure in life and in business. I want more of that in society.
Christian, thank you so much for spending some time with me on Good Authority. It's been an honor to get to know you a little bit and learn about your world, and hope to have you back on the show someday.
It's been my highest pleasure. Thank you for having me, Johnson.
Thanks so much for listening to Good Authority. If you enjoyed the conversation, please be sure to get subscribed and leave us a review over at Apple or Spotify or both. You can share the episode with friends, family, colleagues, and maybe even your arch enemy. And you'll be getting new episodes every Wednesday. Thanks so much for listening.